Welcome back to the Demon Slayer Comparison Series. After finishing the end of the Entertainment District nearly a year later, here we are again, now on episode 1 of the Swordsmith Village arc. As such, we have a lot of chapters to go over today, and that's not even counting the 1.5 minute long recap at the beginning, which houses some very light anime exclusive content as we follow Goto making his way through the hellscape our heroes left this place in. That information was transmitted to Ubiyashiki, who, minus some removed blood coughs from the last season, still declares that they will surely be capable of defeating Muzan in the current era. Which brings us to the final piece of recapped material, where Akaza and Demon Meetup Land realizes that one of the upper moons have been killed. There are a lot of newly added cuts here, but for the parts that have been recycled from the last season, it's clear to see that they've undergone quite the transformation. The 2D keys themselves appear to be unchanged, but timing, lighting, and overall composition have been redone, possibly to make it more closely match the presentation of Akaza flying through this place going forward. Quality consistency is very important to Ufotable after all, as is flexing on us with anime exclusive segments like this, where Akaza rides his way to the meetup point. I almost forgot how much this studio loves to create amazing first impressions. I know this isn't the first time we've seen this dimension, but I'm always impressed with what this team can do with the Unreal Engine and Houdini. The amount of high quality, topsy-turvy models they place while knowing exactly how each and every piece supports the camera work plays to their latent strengths as a possible video game studio down the road. It's nigh impossible for the audience to take in every carefully placed object in this scene, yet there's such an assortment of them that it panks on lunacy for how much care was put into this place. But in my opinion, what really makes or breaks this scene is the lighting. The displacement of the luminance is craftily executed while still matching the composition of foreground 2D elements. This sporadic nature keeps the layout fresh, and when it's time to move on, the composition does very well to hide scene transitions. Ufotable certainly lives up to their name as one of, if not the best compositing teams in Japan. But that's not to short them on their visual storytelling talents. Akaza's ride through this complex space is filled with interesting redirection, engrossing symmetricity of moving parts, and gorgeous Japanese architecture, some of which actually hint at some of the upcoming places in the story, but we'll just leave that point where it stands. The main thing here is that this place successfully reestablishes itself as the infinitely boundless space that it is before Akaza's joyride is interrupted by the sound of a biwa, which sends him right to the place of the meeting. This is when the Swordsmith Village arc officially begins, and we can start up on chapter 98 officially. It's also the time when we start getting introduced to all the upper moons, and what better one to start with than the Vase Devil. Coming into the anime realm with some beautiful oily CGI, it nicely transitions to the 2D creature himself emerging from his vase as the camera stays with him like he's doing a vlog or something. Ufotable wanted to make sure they set a good impression with these reveals, and while their industry-leading compositing already does that well enough, it's topped off with some very fun editing techniques involving displacement, exposure leaks, and a modest amount of film grain. And that's just for Upper Moon number 5. You might have noticed this stuff being used for Akaza earlier on too, and that's because it really outputs the feeling of overwhelming power, stopping just short of being overdone like an Indian soap opera. Not all Upper Moons get this treatment though, because in the case of Upper Moon 4, some goofy chords is just about all he gets for his seemingly weak appearance. Also, I'm no music artist, but it's hard for even me to ignore the music composition here. It, and the ambience folly for that matter, so perfectly syncs with everything on screen, and it's incredibly fitting that a low guitar rumble is the main accompaniment for almost every major reveal. The anime alone had Upper Moon 2 put out a staircase of lights last time, but that's hardly the most visually stimulating thing he does, because a barrage of psychedelic effects soon follows as he reaches out from within this abstract eyeball and then towards Akaza's shoulder. Just the displacement effects alone makes it clear that Akaza didn't like that, but putting his feelings aside, it's hard not to appreciate the presence this guy has. I didn't mention this last time, but a user from the last version of this video that was taken down, that I sadly don't have the name of anymore, pointed out how Ufotable uses Live 2D for cuts like this, and I'm inclined to agree. Live 2D, for those who don't know, is a real-time 2D image manipulation software that a lot of VTubers actually use. It's not meant for drastic maneuvers, rather for gradual ones, and Ufotable has a whole team dedicated to working with this technology. Knowing this, it becomes much easier to see where it was used in the past, and while I won't underestimate Ufotable's ability to key all this by hand, it does make much more sense for certain slow-mo moments. Especially for this moment when Doma is looking at the audience like he knows we're looking right back at him. His vibe is is just so discomforting, especially since it's mixed in with a cloak of happy-go-luckiness. Even as this guy is talking with his coworker, in the anime alone, he continues to tease Akaza on the side. But there's only so much one can take, especially someone who uses their fists for a living. Quite the jaw-dropping attack, but it's clear that Doma's intention was to get a reaction from Akaza all along. Wonderful use of camera shake for this bit, really keeps the tension alive in anticipation for what Doma will do as a result of this hit, but really the guy just wanted to poke fun at Akaza while testing his strength at the exact same time. Oh, and speaking of strength, the B-Wall lady finally answered Akaza's question as to where the number 1 upper moon is, and what do you know? He's been listening stealthily this entire time, just from much further away in the anime. Now this is a guy that demands our attention, because despite his lack of a flashy intro, he's probably the biggest enigma in this dimension. We'll find out more about him later, but for now, let's move on to the head honcho of this house, who gets the most glorified entrance out of all of them. Ufotable used every trick in their playbook for pulling off this long shot here. From the shotgun assortment of effect overlays all the way to the jaw-dropping compositing for extremely ambitious camera work. Seriously, this shot is just absurd. These 2D characters are picture perfect with the rotation of their 3D environments, and throughout it all, they're even able to sneak in some panels from the manga while giving symbolism as to how Muzan sees the upper moons as he drops them into a test tube. It's 100% the most well-directed shot of the episode, and plays with the concept of Muzan being upside down to the upper moons. Not entirely sure how gravity is supposed to work in this realm, but one thing is for sure, the 3D team did an incredibly immaculate job at constructing Muzan's science project, while also adding a few hints here and there as to what it is that he's working on. So there's obviously a lot of extra imagery going on here, including the upper moon's reaction to Muzan's heavy words of disapproval. But all in all, I'd say they're taking this much better than the lower moons did. They keep their charismaticism even when Muzan explains his discontent about them being unable to kill Ubuyashiki's family or find the blue spider lily. That second part eliciting an anime-only reaction from Akaza as he was told to find it. I love these shots of Muzan working with the test tubes, not just because of the dynamic complexness of this pan shot, but also because of how its anime-only foul reaction to whatever he puts in it plays into the anger that he will soon be emitting. His frustration towards this lack of progress is doubled down in the anime, and it's all thanks to the VFX pipeline that Ufotable has been refining since, well, forever. All of their effects in this anime-exclusive glass carnage just have this way of moving that makes it very characteristic of the company, and their boiling liquid is no exception. It's honestly astounding how much Ufotable can add to each panel, and it's only possible because of how interconnected their staff is through all parts of the production process. It's the only reason why shots like this can exist at all. I'm sure temptation must be high to use CGI models when the background moves around like this, but primary director Haruo Sotozaki is surely confident enough in their staff's ability to know it's not necessary. Demon Slayer has always been that show that loves pushing the boundaries of what anime can do through technological enhancements, but never at the cost of the root of the art form. They use their technology as a bridge to connect real 2D talent while elevating storyboards to their next level. Scene changes and camera work of this caliber just wouldn't look nearly as engaging otherwise. After all, it's what makes this decapitation of Gyoko all the more impactful. This is the second time we've seen, or well, not seen, Muzan take someone's head without even moving, but while some more overlay effects insist upon Muzan's rage, Gyoko here has no complaints about being in his master's presence. It was a nice experience for him, all the way up to when the Biwa lady reverses gravity and sends him right back to where he came from, in a visually impressive, yet also slightly comical manner. Despite Muzan's rough handling of the guy though, it looks like he still will be taking the intel he got from him seriously, as his orders asking number 4 and number 5 to confirm the intel is the last thing we'll hear from him as the curtain shuts on him in his makeshift laboratory. Well, they're more like shogi doors, which have quite the interesting design compared to the manga, but that aside, now that Muzan's gone, it looks like it's just the upper moons that are left in each other's company. Lucky for Doma, because he would simply love to get in on the little mission Muzan just gave Gyoko. This guy really likes to stick his head where it doesn't belong, and that kinda gives Akaza all the more reason he needs to remove that head from the equation. Don't worry, YouTube staff, he's still alive. Believe it or not, Akaza's disapproval of this thorn in his side is actually what ends out chapter 98, so without missing a beat, let's move right on to chapter 99 as the hand Akaza sliced Doma with gets sliced off as well. An act that was done by none other than Upper Moon number 1, Kokushibo. This guy carries some extremely heavy presence with him, as well as a crazy amount of graphical effects to make up for his more tame initial appearance. As a stickler for hierarchy, he seems to have some issue for how Akaza vents his rage against those ranked higher than him, but it's that very fact that this guy is above him that fuels his rage even more. Number 2 might have a big mouth, but Akaza seems to hate just about everyone here, including the guy that has 6 eyes on his face. Very creepy, if not also a very cool face reveal. Despite how insanely powerful this guy is though, Akaza seems to be quite determined to kill this guy in the future. But until Akaza can learn how to vanish as cool as this guy does, it looks like he still has a long ways to go. For now, he'll just be jumping his way out of this dimension while giving number 2 the cold shoulder. And he's not the only one, because Gyoko wanted to get far away from him as well. Actually, in the manga, Doma protested that he still wanted to go along with number 4 and 5 before they vanished, leaving him stunned when he was the only one that didn't get to go. But in the anime, they both disappeared before Doma asked the Biwa lady to send him off as well. This guy just continues to get the cold shoulder treatment, doesn't he? Almost makes you feel bad for the guy, but I think we've yet to see the deepest extents of this guy's demonic nature. After all, it looks like this guy is taking on the role of a cult leader, so that doesn't really bode well. But while we guess what he's up to, this is where our demon coverage of this episode comes to an end, and we move along to one of the more confusing dream sequences of this show. A sequence that's gonna be kind of hard to talk about because it concerns many topics that plant themselves firmly in spoiler territory, so as to tread lightly, I'll be mincing my words a lot throughout this part. But really, there isn't that much that's different. There aren't any big dialogue changes or any real character repositionings worth mentioning. However, it is worth mentioning that in the anime, we get a better look at the sword that this man is carrying, and it looks quite different compared to the one that the Upper Moon 1 was carrying. Outside of that, I can't say much else. This conversation between the man that looks like Tanjiro and the man that looks like Kokushibo is a very enigmatic one, but creates a very vivid image in Tanjiro's comatose mind, who, as it just now turns out, has finally started to reawaken after his battle against Gyutaro last season. This man fought hard enough to sleep for 2 months, and as a matter of fact, he seems to have done just that, as Kanao here says to him by his bedside after breaking a vase on the way in. The timing of when she broke that vase is a little different in the anime, and non-audible on top of that, but the main thing here is that her relief at Tanjiro's awakening is what closes out chapter 99. So, after finally getting this episode's title card 20 minutes in, we can finally move on to chapter 100, where we follow Goto carrying some delicious Castella to Tanjiro's room. It's funny to think that for as long as we've known this guy, only now are we actually getting his name, as well as his own thoughts regarding the main slayers of this story. As anyone would, it seems like he's come to appreciate this little band of idiots, and would even go so far as to leave a tasty treat to one who isn't even awake to eat it. A nice thought, and one that the anime alone shows us the desired result of, but once he enters the room, he'll realize that all of that won't be necessary. Or at least he would've, because for the entire time he's cleaning up Kanao's mess, her and Tanjiro didn't say a single damn word to one another. They must have just been staring at each other all the way up to when Goto approached them and Tanjiro thanked him for the food. And thus the humor ensues. I think just about anyone would react the same way. Throwing formality and rank out the window, this guy has officially become the new straight man of this show, as well as the official babysitter of the main cast. But you know what? I think he loves everyone here as much as the audience does, especially in goofy moments like this. I said this a lot in the last season, but I love how Ufotable keeps mangaka Gotoge's style in for that goofiness. That authenticity goes a long way because this story is just so good at mixing in seriousness with funniness while still giving the audience substantial information, like how we learned about what happened to everyone after the fight last season. It was pretty touch and go for everyone after Nezuko was left with the 3 unconscious boys. No idea where she is right now, but for Inosuke, well, he seems to be doing just fine. What a great reintroduction to everyone's favorite boar character. Though Viz Media, I am a little upset that you made Inosuke properly say Tanpachido's name. I was honestly concerned that Inosuke would accidentally re-injure Tanjiro here, especially since in the manga alone, he's pulling on Tanjiro's face where he got impaled from last season. He really is like the animal the girls are teaching Tanjiro about right now. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I'd have any knowledge retention whatsoever right after waking up from a 2-month-long coma. Tanjiro's pretty lax when it comes to all this incoming stimuli in his room, but that's just how he's always been. But personally, I'm most amazed by Kanao. She barely spoke a word of her own volition last time we saw her, and yet here she is expressing concern for another. And I'm glad she did because, as it turns out, I guess all this excitement was a little too much for poor Tanjiro. But thankfully, everyone now knows he'll be alright from now on. Even Tamayo's cat, who is patiently waiting nearby, an appearance that actually happens as a bonus page on the last chapter. Nice inclusion. It was also nice that after a week passed, Ufotable made Aoi the narrator for Tanjiro's recovery, and the narrator for some anime exclusive stuff as well. In the anime alone, she said that they sent the news of Tanjiro's recovery to Goto, which we saw anyway in the manga, but without the extra info of how the letter was written by Kyo. She then goes on to talk about Inosuke heading off to his next battle, and then brings us into completely anime exclusive territory where she talks about what Zenitsu is up to right now. Somehow through his cries for help, he managed to break the fourth wall and realize that Aoi was talking about him. After telling him to shut up, her anime exclusive dialogue continues as she speaks of Tanjiro's rehabilitation process, perfectly leading us back into the manga as Tanjiro does some more rehabilitation training with the girls. And during these backbreaking exercises, he comes to the realization which will be the main driving force for this arc: to get a new sword from Haga Nezuka, who is simply thrilled with the fact that Tanjiro broke yet another one. I really don't see how Tanjiro didn't see this coming. The guy nearly killed him the last time he showed up. Better to just go meet him directly, in the place where all demon swords are made, Swordsmith Village. Getting a good swordsmith to rely on is paramount after all, which actually perfectly segues us into our sponsor for this video, Katana Sword. When looking for a sponsor for the Swordsmith Village arc, I really couldn't find anything more appropriate than this. Not only does this swordsmith create custom katanas with both traditional and modern techniques, they also make replica katanas from the characters of Demon Slayer. One sort of which I'll be showing off at the end of this video, but there are two main warnings I have to give you before then. First off, these things are not toys. They are to be used either as collector's items or as practice items for seasoned professionals. Please check your country's and state laws before attempting to purchase one. After all, these are specially crafted pieces of metalwork made by Japanese and Chinese professionals and need to be treated with as much care as those who made them. I received a blade from this swordsmith that is a replica of a Demon Slayer sword, and I'll be showing it off at the end of the video. Just know that the sword hasn't actually been unveiled in the anime yet, so watch at your own risk. If after all that you're still interested, then visit the link in the description and enter code REGISTRY to get 10% off your entire order. Not everyone can be as fortunate as Tanjiro to visit a swordsmith in person after all. But granted, when we get back into our coverage, we'll find out that he has to go through quite a few hoops to get there. Well, they're more inconveniences than anything else, as his senses will be inhibited all throughout this back-riding journey. He's pretty understanding about it though. In the anime alone, he even put on his blindfold before his piggyback companion finished her explanation. Nose plugs might be a little excessive though. Those will probably be the most annoying part of the journey. Also on that journey, Tanjiro's acquisition of the narration from the manga does have different Japanese text compared to the anime, but the main message is still there. During this very cool shot of a blade turning into forestry, he still emphasizes how purposefully hidden this place is. After all, not even the lady carrying him knows where it is. Only through a chain of kakushi is the location eventually unveiled, but even then the routes change, as do the crows directing the kakushi and even the kakushi themselves. It's a pretty rigorous way of concealing information, and considering demons and their lack of social skills, it makes sense why Muzan can't get the information he needs. Tanjiro's so impressed by this social network that he thanks every single person that drops him off and picks him up. Something the manga spelled out for us word by word, though the anime does give us some thankful thoughts of one of the kakushi Tanjiro is so nice to. After all, without them, he wouldn't have the privilege of experiencing the following sights firsthand. A site that has thankfully been filled with plenty of people since its unveiling in the manga. Fun fact, one of Tanjiro's reactions to seeing this site actually was adapted into a commercial break cutscreen not too long ago. There are some additional filler lines between this lady and Tanjiro as he gets acquainted with the structure of the village, but overall, Tanjiro's hearty thankfulness is still just as boundless as ever. So boundless, in fact, that it drew the attention of a certain solitary girl in one of the hot springs nearby. Quite the risque sight. We'll learn more about this girl later on, but for right now, this is the site that ends out chapter 100. So let's move right along to the next commercial break cutscreens, which are referenced from the extra page of chapter 100 and the title page of chapter 101 respectively, and then move right along into that chapter where Tanjiro is getting introduced to the chief of the village. Someone who requires the utmost respect from his visitors. Thankfully, he happened to meet the most respectful character in anime history, who in the anime alone also exclaims how delicious the karinto he was offered was. Other than that, Ufotable didn't rewrite the script too much for this conversation. Minus Tanjiro's Charlie Brown impersonation, even the cartoony effects emitted by the chief were kept in. He seems to be pretty worn down by Haga Nezuko's rebellious phase, especially considering he and the fight-ready staff behind him hold the guy accountable for Tanjiro's broken blade problem. So until that little internal squabble is straightened out, there's nothing nothing Tanjiro can do besides hit the hot springs. But before that, we're gonna take a quick anime-only stop at a nearby forge to see how some of these katanas are crafted. I'm seriously glad Ufotable added this bit, because while the elemental properties of Nichirin's swords are purely fictional, the process depicted here is inspired from a tried and true art form. Just like in real life, metal ore is endlessly hammered and folded to not only craft the shape of the blade, but to ground out any impurities of the material. It's a heavy-duty, yet finely tuned process that has been perfected over the centuries. Even the tools that they use here are accurate. Tanjiro's tour guide didn't go into too much detail here, but I will say that when I was doing the research for the sponsor of this video, I learned quite a bit about how disciplined and intricate the sword-making process is. It's definitely something worth looking into if you have any spare time, but for now, let's move on to the hot springs. Hot springs that our tour guide explains in the anime alone can cure a wide variety of ailments, including constipation, somehow. And believe it or not, that's just one of a much bigger list of healing properties that came from the extra page on chapter 100. Truly a hot spring of the gods. But before Tanjiro gets to test out the amazingness of this hot spring, he'll first have to deal with a wild Hashira on the loose. One that might be cute as all hell, but is also a flight risk for demonetization. Thankfully, Tanjiro is way ahead of me on that front. In the anime, Tanjiro literally charged her to cover her up, getting himself spun around in the process. It's funny how these two barely got to know each other back in season 1, yet they interact like they've known each other for years. She was pretty upset about getting ignored, but Tanjiro knew exactly what to say for her to perk up and head off singing a song. A song which has had its lyrics changed since the manga. It's kinda hard to imagine anyone who could ignore someone as cheerful as her, but as it turns out, we're about to meet that person in question. This guy has had many short cameos throughout the course of this show, and every new time we see him, it just adds to the questions for what his deal is. He seems to have a very rough exterior and a feral nature that rivals even that of Inosuke. But if Tanjiro can tame him, then surely he can do the same here. Using the power of public nudity. I reacted to this part live on my Patreon, and I must say that this was pretty out there. I mean, it is a public bath, but the lengths Tanjiro will go to strike up a conversation that was already dead in the water astounds me. Now it looks like both Tanjiro and Mitsuri have gotten the cold shoulder from the man they call Genya, but even still, they seem to be more concerned about his well-being over his sharp tongue and even decide to bring some food to his room later on. This girl matches Tanjiro's positivity so well that even Nezuko, who hasn't had the best interactions with Hashira up till now, is walking along with the singing Hashira, who's actually no longer singing in the anime, but instead just talking to Nezuko about how hungry she still is. Seriously, those beady eyes just kill me. Again, they may not be used in every adapted panel, but I love how for moments when the humor of it is relied upon, Ufotable holds very firm in preserving that art style. Like I said last season though, the one thing they didn't bring over is having an official narrator like there is in the manga. So some lines like this can end up getting cut, but it's a good thing a face like this can already tell 1,000 words. Despite Mitsuri's on the surface very straightforward motivation for getting strong though, she still looks out for those under her and seems like a very encouraging person to be around. I feel like it would be hard for anyone around her to not be swayed by her charm. However, she's not the only one in the vicinity with those characteristics because Tanjiro's own charm swayed her right back. These two have some very sweet exchanges, ones that can be felt even for those closely watching nearby. But with Mitsuri's final piece of advice for Tanjiro, that left him with just a little more than he was able to bear. I can only imagine how this scene would change with Zenitsu here. But while I leave you with that thought, let's move on to our last stretch of anime exclusive content, where we observe Tanjiro practicing his breathing as well as follow him to the breakfast table. All the dialogue within this scene isn't horribly important, but it does reaffirm that Tanjiro will be notified when Haganezuka is found, as well as give Tanjiro a chance to give Nezuko, the slithering snake, a heads up on the treasure hunt he'll be taking part of today. Once he heads out to look for that treasure, that's when we'll sync back up with the manga for the final time, but not without some final changes to leave us with. For starters, when Tanjiro discovered the missed Hashira and the child with him, it's no longer due to him directly spotting them, but now because he could hear them arguing in the distance. Some of that arguing is anime exclusive, but some of that is also taken from the beginning of the next chapter as well, which pretty much brings us to the end of this chapter, but not before getting one of the biggest changes. Tanjiro noticing the man behind the arguing child is not in the manga. Quite the mystery this red-haired figure is. And it makes a fantastic cliffhanger for a stellar first episode. Man, is it good to be back on this show. Thank you all for watching. I'm really glad that this series is back. I owe this show and you guys everything for how far I've made it on YouTube, and I couldn't be more thankful for everyone's ongoing support. I just know we're gonna see some more amazing work coming from the studio, and I can't wait to document the experience with everyone here. But until I cover the much shorter episode 2, we'll end things here for now. Coming up, I'll be showing off that sword I mentioned earlier, which is probably a spoiler for some, so click off now if you're not interested. But not before considering giving this video a like, sharing it with a friend, or subscribing for more future videos like this. Once again, a very special thanks to all my loyal friends on Patreon, and I hope everyone watching this video has a very fantastic day. Well, until next time, this is Registry, signing off. Take care, everyone.